Hello everybody, welcome. I'm so excited that you're here today. So it is 4:30 on Monday, which is my Facebook Live time. And so today I had promised that we would be discussing the awesome new Stampin' blends. And so I want to get right into that and start talking about it. If you are watching this on a recording on YouTube, welcome as well. But for now, this is live on Facebook. So yay, if you ever want to join me live, tune in on Mondays at 4:30 p.m. Pacific time. And I'm always here, pretty much. Unless it's a holiday, then I won't be here. Okay, so have people jumping on. Hello, everyone. And we're going to just jump right in and I'm going to share some stuff with you. Okay, so I have all of the Stampin' blends. They're beautiful. And I do want to talk about them just a little bit to go over some of the questions that I've received and also just explain a few things. Okay, so the first thing is I've received questions saying, are these the same thing as the blendabilities? Those were a product that Stampin' Up! Released, it may be a couple years ago now. And basically, there's no other way to say this except that the product flopped. And it was due to manufacturing issues. The pins just did not work correctly. And so Stampin' Up! Made the hard decision to just not carry them anymore. But did say that that didn't mean that we wouldn't get an alcohol marker in the future if they could work out all the kinks. So they did that. They worked out all the kinks. And they created Stampin' blends. So it's a different name. Let me put it upright. This is what they look like. I'm sorry that the writing is backwards for you. So this is what they look like, and they have a much nicer lid on each end. They have a much nicer nib on each end, which we're going to color with and I'll show you about. And then they have a bullet point on the other end. So I have been playing with them. I have been using them so that I would know what to share with you and what to tell you about and stuff like that. So the first question was the blendabilities. So yes, they are a very similar product. They're alcohol-based markers, but they are different. They are not exactly the same. First of all, there's only two pens. Let me find the other one here. Well, you'll see them when we, oh, here it is. So there's only two in each color family, or not color family, color, two in each color. There's a light and a dark. And so they removed the middle tone, which actually works out okay. It's not really a problem for blending. And my hope is that Stampin' Up's going to release a bunch more colors over time. But of course they're going to want to see how these go and if people purchase them and stuff like that. So the second question that I get a lot is, are the Stampin' blends available to customers? I've had several people email me. They eventually will be, yes. Right now, no. Right now, Stampin' blends were only available to demonstrators from October 1st to October 15th. Stampin' Up! Has not released a date to us as of this video filming right now as to when they will be available. So, hi Christy. I just have to say hi to my cousin who's on. She's the first time a family member has ever watched my live. That's kind of cool. Okay, so anyway, so these will be available at a date in October, or in later into the year, but we're not exactly sure what that date is yet. Stampin' Up! Hasn't told us. So that's another question that I've received a lot. When are they going to be available to customers? Not sure. The next question I've had is the price point, and are they refillable? They are $9 for a set, but you're going to be able to purchase them individually for $4.50 a piece, which is really great because they are not refillable. So if you just needed a new light old olive, you could just replace this one instead of replacing both. So I've had some questions of why aren't they refillable? The reason is because they have a lower price point. So most people compare these markers, or are trying to compare these markers to Copic markers. So let's take care of that discussion right now. There is no comparison. There's no comparison. You're comparing apples and oranges to compare these to Copic markers. And the reason is, it's like anything else on the market. They all have their place. Everything has its place. Okay, so I'm getting a message saying that somebody can barely hear me. Are you guys having a hard time hearing me? You might have to turn your volume up. It could be your volume. I don't know. Okay, so I'm going to keep going, and then hopefully you guys will let me know if you're having a hard time hearing me. So there's really no comparison between Copic markers and these markers or any other alcohol markers. They all stand alone for their own reasons. Copic markers are very expensive. They are anywhere from $7 to all the way up to $12 a marker, depending on their demand. And they require a refill, which is $6.50. So, and you can replace the nibs on them and things like that. So they're a higher price point. Here's what I have kind of come up with and wanted to share with you is that these markers are a fantastic start to learning how to use alcohol markers. There are special rules and things that apply to using alcohol-based markers. So I would say go for something a little bit less expensive, but that's a high quality product, and try it out. See if you like it. You may hate it. So you don't want to waste a bunch of money investing into Copic markers if you aren't going to be 100% sure that it's something you're going to want to do. The thing with Copic marker coloring is it's very, it takes a long time to learn how to do. It's an art form basically, and over time you become better and better and better, which I have. You just keep practicing and practicing and practicing, and you get better and better and better. So it's like anything, but who wants to invest $300, $400, $500, $1,000 into markers if they don't know if they're really going to love it? So this is a fantastic place to start. You're looking at about $120 investment for all of the markers to see if it's something you're going to enjoy doing. And if you do enjoy doing it, then at some point you could invest into getting Copic markers as well. Then you would already have all the Stampin' Up! Markers, which will match your Stampin' Up! Ink pads and your Stampin' Up! Paper and all of that, which is another fantastic benefit of these markers, is that they match all of the products we already have. They match our ribbon, they match our paper, they match our ink pads and our cardstocks and our designer series papers. So that's a huge benefit to these markers, is if you already have made an investment into Stampin' Up! Products, then you're gonna get alcohol markers that match those, and just there's no guesswork in it. So I hope that answers some of the questions regarding Copics versus Stampin' Blends and just what Stampin' Blends are. And then of course I thought there was really no better way to answer more questions and you know, show you how these work than doing a demonstration. I'm sure you guys would like to see that. So I'm going to do the worst part of the video right now and change the video from my face down to the thing, and I'm going to try to prevent you guys from getting seasick by just covering the camera. So just change my camera around in hopes that you will not completely lose your lunch. And I'm just going to lower this a little. Okay, so Andrea has joined us. Hello, Andrea. And she says, I'm a coloring genius. And I think that that's so super sweet of her, but it's really not true. I have no more of an idea of what to do than you guys, except that I practice a lot and I take classes. And so that's what's gotten me to where I am now. So yes, I am better than I was. There's no doubt about that. But I'm definitely not an expert. Okay, so let's talk about all the things. This is, everybody has asked on my Instagram where I got these charts. I made them. I just used a T-square ruler and drew the lines, and then I sat and I blended colors. Now you might be thinking, why does she have two of these? Well, something I've learned in art classes that I've taken is that anytime you get a new coloring medium, you will find that the best way to learn how to use them is by putting them to different papers based on what you use. So something that I use with my Copic markers is Crafter Companion cardstock by Spectrum Noir. Now, if you're a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator and you're watching this, your hair might have just stood up on the back of your neck and you might be like, oh my God, why is she showing another cardstock? I'm going to get to that, but just don't worry. Okay, and then I also have Whisper White thick cardstock. Okay, the reason is because I use both of these. In my Copic coloring, I use Spectrum Noir Crafter Companion cardstock. It is a white cardstock, but it is literally designed for alcohol marker coloring. You may see a difference in the two. So on top is the Crafter Companion and on the bottom is Whisper White. If you noticed, for example, the Pool Party color, there's a much more harsh transition in the Whisper White cardstock and a much smoother transition in the Crafter Companion. The reason for that is because this Crafter Companion cardstock is designed specifically to work with alcohol-based markers. The markers are able to soak into the paper and move about, and with that happening, there's no coating or anything, and so when the markers can soak into the paper and move, then the other markers that get layered on top can move and blend with what's already in there. I hope that makes some kind of sense. Now, with that being said, you will notice that some of them don't look that different, actually. For example, the Cherry Cobbler is not a huge difference in transition. It blends pretty well on both papers. The other thing you will discover is that each ink could act differently because it has different properties in it, possibly, that cause it to act differently in the paper. I have no explanation for that. It's just how it is. So down here on the Crafter Companion, I have mixed different colors together to create different looks. One thing I will say is, and I will give these tips as I go, but if you color too much, you're going to start having some bleeding and get that fuzzy line that comes out around. Now, some of that can be prevented, and we'll talk about that. But some of it just happens if you have too much ink happening. One thing I've noticed about these Stampin' blends is that they are very juicy, which is a really good thing, but you just have to learn how to control your marker usage basically on the paper. Okay, so let's talk about do's and don'ts and rules of using alcohol-based markers. Let's bring some of them over here so you can be looking at them because they're so beautiful. And I just want to talk about some of the rules. Okay, so rule number 1 is that you have to use Memento Tuxedo black ink. This is a dye ink, and it is specifically designed to work with alcohol-based markers. You can also use any of your Stampin' Up! Ink pads in conjunction with these, except for basic black archival ink. Do not use basic black archival ink with these markers. Okay, let me say it this way. You wouldn't be able to use them with Copic markers and use it with Copic markers. So my guess is that you can't use it with these either because they are alcohol based. So all the rules that I'm going to tell you are the rules that apply to Copic markers. And it is possible that Stampin' Up! Could come out and say, oh no, that rule doesn't apply with these. I'm just telling you what I know from working with alcohol based markers, okay? So you always need to use a Memento Tuxedo black ink. If you plan to draw a scene and then color, or do any detail with a pen and color, like I did with this project, then you need to have some sort of pen that is safe for your alcohol markers. So these pens are called Copic multiliners, and they are a pigment ink. They are water and Copic proof. So that is really important to know because they will not mess up your alcohol marker and they will not run when you add the ink to them. So I have this pack. They're really inexpensive. You can get them on Amazon, and they are called Copic multi-liners. Now you don't need these at all if you're not planning on drawing scenes. I've been asked by a million people where I got these stamps. These are not stamps. The girl and the mailbox are stamped. Everything else is drawn. So I drew the walkway and the cobblestone and the door myself using a T-square ruler, and I created this scene kind of just freehand that's behind her. So I hope that answers some of the questions about this. So that's a tip for you as far as creating your own scene. So we know now this is the ink we stamp in. We use a Copic multi-liner for drawing. I used that to draw all of these. And another rule is you should not use embossing powder with your alcohol markers. It will ruin the nib. So if you do embossing, heat embossing, and you want to color in where it's heat embossed, you could do that, but you need to be very, very careful that you're not touching the end of your marker to that embossing powder, because it has been known to destroy the end of the marker. Now, the good thing about this is these are a lower price point and they're replaceable and they're not refillable. So I guess if you really were jonesing to color over the top of embossing powder, you could do it and then just throw the marker away and buy a new one. Another tip is if you're using white embossing powder and you color over it, it will not just wipe away like other items do. Remember, this is alcohol based, so it dries very quickly and it sticks to what it's being colored on. So it's not like using a water-based marker where you could just wipe away the excess. Okay? So with all of that said, I'm going to do some coloring, and I would love it if you guys would chime in and ask any questions that you might have about the alcohol markers, anything that you want to know. Are you curious about anything specific? Please just feel free to chime in. I'm going to organize my markers here just so they are in color order. When I work with them, I like them to be, okay, so I am kind of crazy. So I like them to, to be in rainbow order. So red, orange, yellow, green, blue. And that just helps me, and I put them dark and light. This could be a good tip for you as well. It just kind of helps me in using them. I can quickly grab what I need and they're ready to go. I'm kind of being quick about this. Okay, so Brina, I hope I'm saying that correctly. She's asking, is the in colors an option for the colors, lemon lime twist? That would be amazing if they were. As of right now, they are not. So I'm hoping that they do that. Okay, this is a project kit that Stampin' Up! Supplied as an option to purchase to demonstrators for the October 1st through the 15th for purchasing along with the Copic markers. And so I've already stamped it all. It's really cute. I've already stamped it all, and so I just thought I would color a couple of these, and then I'm going to move on to a couple of other things. So let's do some birds, because, okay, so Terry asks, do you like to use the lifter as both a blender and a lifter? So that is something that is very interesting to me in that I have never used markers my Copic markers to blend. Let's see, what color do we want to do these birds? Let's do one in Cherry Cobbler. Okay, so I've never used markers or a color lifter to blend. I don't really know where Stampin' Up! Came up with that. I know that that's what they're advertising, but I've never ever seen a Copic marker artist do that. So for me, I'm a little nervous here coloring with you guys, so I'm kind of going out of the lines, and I'm worried about my time, like I'm taking up too much of your time. Okay, so, yeah, I had never heard that, and, you know, if that's something that they think is a good idea, then that's fantastic, but that's not what I do. I hope that doesn't really answer your question. I know that that's what they've advertised, that you use the lifter to blend, and that's very foreign to me. I will say that in order to get a lighter tone of something, you can use it to help like that, but it's just not my preferred method, if that makes any sense. So I'm pretending kind of like the light source is coming down on top of these birds, and I've colored the whole, so I like to color and saturate the entire area with my lightest color first, and then I go from there and put in my shading, and then I'm going back over my shading, as you can see, and trying to blend it. Now, this is where it's hard for me. With Copic markers, I have three or four even sometimes steps. So I would be able to just keep blending this lighter and lighter and lighter. So right now, if I go over this again, it's going to add another layer of color, and I'm going to lose this lighter color that I have here. So my way to fix that is I'm going to go ahead and go over it because I want the blend to look good. So now it's very blended and it has a really nice blend, and there's a little bit of shading, but I really like dramatic shading. So what I've done is taken my dark gray marker, and I'm going just around the edge, and you can see I'm making very small, quick strokes. And I'm just going around the edge where I want the shading, where I want it to be a little bit darker. And it would be a little darker under his wing as well. Then I will go back in with my cherry cobbler, my dark cherry cobbler. And you can see the difference I've gotten here. It really is more of a dramatic shading. And then we're going to just add a little bit of yellow to the beak. And I'm not even going to worry about shading his beak. And I'm going to give him some yellow legs as well. So then you end up with this more dramatic shading effect by adding the gray. And it blends because they're meant to blend together. It's not going to, one color is not going to transfer to another marker, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so then we'll color the other bird, and I think I'm going to do them in pumpkin pie. So again, this paper that I'm stamping on right now is just Stampin' Up's paper, and you can see it's blended pretty well. I'm actually pretty impressed with how well these markers blend on Stampin' Up's paper. Another tip you definitely need to be aware of is whenever you're coloring with alcohol-based markers, you need to be coloring on paper, because if you color on like a hard surface, the ink will go through and then it'll push back up through the paper, and it causes tons of bleeding. Okay, so I have a little bit of a highlight here on his chest, and I'm gonna try to leave some of that. I don't know how successful I'll be, but yeah, it's gonna go away. I can just tell you right now it's going to go away. Okay, so Tiffany says, do you color your whole image with the lightest color first? Yes, I do. I always color my entire image with the lightest color first. There are a few exceptions to that rule, but for the most part, that's what I try to do. Okay, so now I'm going to go back in and do some blending. But you notice that I am not going over the whole bird. And that is because if I do that, it will darken this area up here, and I don't want that dark area darkened. So the other thing that you can do is you can come in with another color and go right over the top to kind of just create some interest. And so now this bird kind of has this two-tone effect happening. Now the one thing I will say is you have to be really careful about is that a lighter tone will remove color, even if that lighter tone is not the lifter. Like this is our lifter, and this will lift color, but so will this. If I were to run this marker over this red, it will also lift the color away from the bird as well. Now here's a little tip that I love, is if you take your color lifter, which I think that's, yes, it is called a color lifter, and you run it, I went outside the lines right here, so I'm just going to run it along the edge of this bird, and it will push. It's not actually lifting the color out of the paper, it's pushing it. So it's pushing this color back into the image. So right here where I went outside the lines, I was able to push that color back in, and once it dries, you'll hardly even know that it was there. So I'm going to go back in again with my dark Daffodil Delight and just color the little legs and the beak on the bird. And then just because I'm feeling a little festive here, I think I'm going to add a little bit of red to this bird's wing right here. Maybe tie it in just a little bit with the other bird. So now I have these really cute, sweet little birds that are ready to go on a card, except I really hate that I went outside the lines. I will say red is like your nemesis color for trying to correct it. It's a very strong color. So when you try to correct a red, it's a struggle. It can be difficult. Okay, so I had a lot of questions. So this is, as I said, stamping, just part of that kit. And then I had a lot of questions about how I stamped and colored, or how I colored the skirt on this girl. So I thought I would just quickly show that to you. I'm not going to do the whole scene. I probably won't even color the whole entire girl, but I thought since I had so many questions about how I colored everything, I thought I would show you. So again, we're using that Memento Tuxedo black ink. That's super important. You don't want to use a different ink and ruin your markers. All right. So there she is. So we're going to just do her skirt. Okay, so as I said earlier, I like to cover the entire area that I'm going to color with ink first, and I always start with my lightest color because and here I'm just doing, these are like just really long strokes. I'm trying to stay in the line there so that I don't have a mess like I had before. The beauty of that is if you're doing something and you decide you want to fussy cut it, then you don't have to worry about staying in the lines. That's kind of nice. Okay, so I have my whole skirt covered, and then I can just start now adding all of my layering and my details. So this skirt, each of these lines to me represents a pleat in her skirt. So in my head, those are valleys. So this area here that's out would be the peak. Now I could do it opposite, and I could make this part dark, and then it'll make these little lines stand out to you. But I feel like those would be the dark recessed lines basically. So very carefully, I am barely applying any pressure at all, so that the tip of my marker will just kind of run inside that little. I'm not doing a great job of it because when I color, I'm usually right over the top of whatever I'm coloring. And so in order for you to be able to see, I have to keep my head out of the way. I am checking comments though, so if you have any comments or questions as I do this, please just feel free to ask. Okay, so the one thing I want to say about this is I could stop right here and it's beautiful, right? There's nothing wrong with her skirt. This is beautiful. I've given it some definition and detail, and it looks great, and you could be really, really happy with it just the way it is. So keep that in mind when you are seeing me color. You really don't have to do anything extravagant to end up with something beautiful. You can keep it very simple. Thank you for the hearts. I love it when you guys send me hearts. You don't have to do anything extravagant. You can definitely achieve some beautiful looks simply by coloring. But I can't leave anything alone, and that wasn't enough for me. So try not to panic when you see me start doing this, but here is your shading. Now I'm going to go all across the bottom of this skirt just with the darker cherry cobbler, and I'm doing flicking motions and lifting when I go up so that I don't have a really harsh line. Hold it closer to the camera. Okay, there it is. So now you can see there's this really harsh line going across here of light and dark, and we have to fix that. You can't leave it like that. So now I'm going to take my light cherry cobbler marker, and I'm going to start at the bottom here and just flick up. And this is pushing those colors together and blending them. And you can still see the line, and that's okay. We're just going to keep working it until you don't. Okay, so now it's this beautiful red, and now I've kind of lost my pleats, if you notice. Deborah asked, we don't refill these, correct? That is correct. These are not refillable markers. You just purchase new ones, and that's how it works. Okay, so the next one I'm going to use is Smoky Slate Dark, because you can see that we've lost the depth of these lines. So I'm using the bullet end, and I'm going to go all the way up each pleat, because I want those pleats to die back down to create a valley. And the only way to do that is to add the darker color on top. And it blends beautifully, no problems. Now, I want to show you something. I'm going to take a little moment to pause because I want this to have a moment to dry and blend. Look at the back. This is how it should be. When you are using any sort of alcohol-based marker, you should be applying enough ink that it's running through your paper and doing this. Because when it does this, that means it's seeping into the paper and it's moving throughout and it's blending. So it should do that. Okay. We're going to go back to our dark cherry cobbler. And I'm going to go back over those stripes one more time because I've used the dark gray, and now I want to turn that dark gray into a dark red. Okay, now I've achieved that. And again, this is beautiful. I could just leave it where it is, but no, that wasn't enough. I wanted more shading at the bottom of her skirt. So I'm taking now the dark gray marker and going all across the bottom of her skirt. And then I will take you back over with a dark cherry cobbler. And at this point, you're probably thinking, good gosh, this is crazy. Who would do this? And your answer is Wendy. Wendy would do this because I have a problem. I have a problem. And then one more time with the lightest. And there we go. Now I'm happy. I'm pleased as punch with her skirt. And that is how I achieved her skirt in the last card I was looking for. And now I can't find it. Where did I set it? I know I have it here. Here it is. So that's how I got her skirt to be nice and dark. Okay, so once I finished coloring all of this, you can see here I used the light marker, the light smoky slate, and then I just took the dark and made some streaks to add dimension to the mailbox. And then I took a white gel pen and put snow falling all over. This is a place that I use the colorless blender or the color lifter. So I took some light gray, and then I just went over it with this to try to push some of that color out. Not completely thrilled with how this part turned out, but that's okay. It happens. For my first go run at this project, it wasn't bad. So, does anyone have any other questions regarding the Copic markers? Sorry guys, the blends, the Stampin' blends. Somebody asked at some point if these were the blendabilities, and I did cover that in the beginning of the video. These are not blendabilities, they are Stampin' blends. They are an alcohol-based marker. So there was an intent there for them to replace that product. Here's our birds. Our little fat birds. Okay, well, I want you guys to stay tuned for information regarding these releasing and being available to customers to purchase. I know that everybody's super excited to get their hands on them. I know I was. They are beautiful. They are a wonderful product, and because I love coloring with alcohol markers so much, you can feel very secure in the fact that it's not something I would promote if I didn't love it. So really, really recommend hanging on, getting some of these. As I said before, I've had several people say, are these like Copic markers? No, these are the same type of marker. They are alcohol based, but these would be a fantastic start to an alcohol marker collection if you're not absolutely sure if it's something that you want to be doing. So I highly recommend hanging on and possibly purchasing these instead. Okay, I'm receiving a lot of questions about paper. And I went over it in the beginning really thoroughly. So if you want to watch the beginning of the video, that would be awesome, because it's kind of long and detailed. So make sure you go back and watch the beginning, and I will give you all the information there on the paper. Okay? There's lots of great tips at the beginning of this video, so try to go back and watch it if you missed the beginning live. If you're watching this over on YouTube, thank you so much for watching, and thank you all so much for watching live as well here on Facebook. I hope you guys have an awesome day, and please feel free to email me if you have any questions. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.